Good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekly Livestock Market Update. I am Brownfield anchor reporter Meghan with this, as always, to talk all things markets. University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
I will preface this by saying, hopefully we make it through this all the way today without me losing power. We are in about 50 to 60 mile an hour winds. So it's a little wild west over here in Kentucky. I guess that'd be the wild east, right?
So at least stay safe. I hope you're down in the basement.
Considering that's where my office is located, that actually makes it pretty interesting. I am watching the power line sway, though, out my little egress window. So it could get real interesting here in a little bit. All right. Enough about me. We're going to talk really kind of a quiet week for us. Restaurant performance index. We'll touch a little bit on demand, but to kick things off, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Yeah, Megan, this week on the cattle side, we had live fed cattle that were $1.20 higher on the week. Those feeder cattle markets were good this week. Pretty strong demand. They were $3 to $5 higher on the week. On the future side, the April live cattle futures contract was basically unchanged on the week, while the April feeder cattle contract was up nearly $2.40 on the week. Choice box beef price also gained this week, up $2.10. That was strong ribs really kind of leading the way, and loins as well in that choice box beef price. On the hog side, having a little bit of trouble getting USDA to report data here on Friday on hog prices, but we're going to call them up about 50 cents on the week. The lean hog futures contract for April was down nearly $1.50, and we saw a gain in the pork cutout value up about 50 cents as strength in about everything except bellies led to a slightly higher pork cutout value.
It has definitely been interesting watching what's going on just in terms of demand and runs this week, because so much they've even been moving numbers without having to get super aggressive in procurement efforts, which I think is really interesting. And maybe says that we don't have short supplies of hogs, right?
So it certainly looks that way when you see where prices have been, that we have ample supplies relative to what's been happening on the demand side of the equation as well.
All right, let's talk slaughter numbers. Walk us through cattle and hogs for the week.
Yeah, cattle slaughter for the week ending March 4th, USDA reports a run of 629,000 head of cattle. That's 11,000 head more than we had a week ago, but 30,000 head less than the same week a year ago. On the hog side, a run this week of 2.52 million head. That's 145,000 head above last week's and 101,000 head above where we were a year ago.
Are we surprised to see where these numbers are heading as we do week over week and not quite yet necessarily yet year over year comparisons?
So not really when you look at what we have. So a little sneak here of you look at year to date hog slaughter running about 1.5% above year ago levels. That's not completely surprising to me, and I want to be a little careful with those percentages yet. We're so early in the year, but being up is not surprising. Cattle slaughter down 2.6% thus far year to date in terms of looking at that weekly slaughter information. Also not surprising. I will say combination, we might jump right away to fewer fed cattle being slaughtered, but I think we're also slowing a little bit what's been happening in terms of cow slaughter as well. So I think all of that makes sense. And I think you and I will say more of the same as we go through the rest of 2023 here in terms of the beginning trends we're seeing in cattle and hog slaughter.
All right, restaurant performance index is our big report for the week. Let's take a closer look at those numbers.
Yeah, so when we look at what we got for the January report on restaurant performance index, it was up 0.9% relative to December. So continued growth after what was last a slowdown in November. So both December and January numbers higher. For me, when I look at the individual components of that restaurant performance index. The current situation was up 1.3%. Strong same store sales, strong customer traffic, I think all helped. I think higher interest rates is maybe the only thing that's kind of been a hamper in that current situation index. Expectations were also up in the report, up less than what we saw in the current situation index. But having both of those individual components higher, I think just tells us that restaurant demand seems to be continuing to move higher.
Which is always a good thing, really, to hear. I would assume also thinking about in terms of recovery or impacts of the broader economy on what people are spending.
Yeah, so all right, so January numbers, right? I'm really kind of interested to see what happens when we get February numbers. I think some of that general economic data got a little worse in February, and does that show up when we start to talk about restaurant performance index? I don't want to jump ahead too quickly, but January kind of started the year fairly strong on those general economic indicators. Seems to relay in the information on the restaurant performance index. This is the one we want to keep watching. I think we need fairly strong demand as we move forward if we want to talk about any kind of higher prices, especially on the hog side of the equation.
Scott, that's it for us for this week. As we look ahead to next week, though, definitely one with some reports to watch.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll get USDA's monthly WASDE report out next week. We also get monthly trade data out at the end of the week and finish with the jobs report.
And we're not that far from prospective plantings, which I think will be interesting coming out at the end of the month.
So do you and I need to make a little wager about prospective plantings? Corn acres. How many corn acres does Meghan Grubner say we're going to have planted?
Not enough.
Oh, you have to say a number. So you can say north or south of 91. How's that? More or less than 91 million acres?
I would say less than.
Oh, perfect. I wanted the more side. So you and I will bet some chicken wings over 91 plus or minus million acres of corn planted.
Just not the burn your face off kind of chicken wings, my friend.
We can find something that we'll both like.
You and my husband can have the spicy wing contest and see who survives.
That sounds like a plan as well.
Scott, when we're looking at, and I'm going to go back to the supply and demand numbers that come out next week, when we look at that report in general, we don't necessarily anticipate a lot of changes on the livestock side of things, but thinking about it in terms of inputs or feed costs, what are you watching for specifically in supply and demand numbers?
Yeah, so for me, one of I think the interesting pieces is just where corn and soybean meal prices might head in front of us. To feeder cattle prices, for example, back in 2014, 2015, when we saw $3 calves, we saw those $3 calves with what was record fed cattle prices, but we also had corn prices below $4 a bushel. We don't have that today. But if we look ahead and we plant 91 million acres of corn, and by summer it looks like we're going to have a good crop, where does that put corn prices? That could be a real boost even to the pork industry, who frankly has kind of been struggling with a little bit of profitability here as we started 2023. Cheaper feed could certainly help that side of the ledger. So for me, watching that corn SNU and soybean meal SNU to an extent are both important as we look at the WASDE information coming out.
Well, we will have plenty to talk about. I will be in sunny Orlando, Florida for Commodity Classic, and I will talk to you then.
Sounds good, Megan.
To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments there. And for a recap of what happens throughout the day in the markets, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm